"Don't be dramatic," my son-in-law sneered, the last thing I heard before my chest exploded in pain. His Halloween prank had nearly killed me, but when I returned from the hospital, the game was over. He thought he could laugh at the old fool who financed his lazy comfort. He was wrong. He screamed later, and this time it wasn't a mask. He had no idea how right he was. "Before we continue," I murmured into the camera, "subscribe to the channel and tell me what time it is where you're watching from." The plastic skeleton dangled limply from my hand, its hollow grin mocking me as I dug through the storage boxes in the garage. I was searching for the fog machine when Wesley's voice sliced through the thin wall separating me from the backyard. Yeah, the old fool pays for everything while I build my business. Free rent, free food, the whole setup. My breath caught. The skeleton swayed gently. "Best deal ever, man. Just gotta tolerate him hovering around." His laughter, easy, smug, floated through the cool October air. I stood frozen, the cardboard edges cutting into my palms as something deep inside me shifted. Not pain, not yet. Just a sharp, cold clarity. 4 years of temporary financial trouble. 4 years of carrying them through every late bill and broken promise. And this was what he said when he thought I couldn't hear. My hands moved automatically, finishing the decorations because that's what I did every Halloween. That's who I'd always been. The Arizona sunset bled across the sky in violent streaks of orange and purple as I carried the boxes to the porch. I hung orange lights along the railing, set up the jack-o'-lanterns, and arranged the fog machine. The motions felt mechanical, detached. Wesley's voice replayed in my head on a cruel loop. The old fool. I draped the fake spiderwebs over the doorframe and thought of Margaret, her laugh, her warmth, the way she made even cheap decorations feel like magic. 3 years gone, and the house we built together now felt like a boarding house run by ghosts. Darkness fell over the neighborhood as I went back to the garage for the final box, the animatronic witch that shrieked when triggered. The single bulb above me flickered, throwing long, twitching shadows across the concrete floor. I bent down to lift the box. That's when a chainsaw engine roared to life behind me. The sound detonated in the small space, shaking the air itself. A figure lunged from the shadows, grotesque mask, plastic chainsaw raised, screaming. My heart seized. Not metaphorically, literally. The pain clamped down like a steel vise, radiating fire down my arm. I stumbled, gasping. The box crashed to the floor, spilling plastic bones across the concrete. Wesley ripped off his mask, grinning. The chainsaw had no blade, just a prop, just noise. "Come on, Eldon," he laughed. "Don't be so dramatic. It's Halloween fun." I tried to speak. "Call? Ambulance." But the words fractured into gasps. My vision tunneled. I dropped to my knees, clutching my chest, the world spinning away. His grin faltered, annoyance replacing amusement. "You're fine. Stop overreacting." Footsteps. My daughter, Cora, appeared in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the porch light. "Wesley, what happened?" "Nothing," he snapped. He got startled. "He's fine, just wants attention." My trembling hand fumbled for my phone. My fingers were numb, heavy, foreign. Somehow, I unlocked it and pressed 911, 911. "What's your emergency?" came the distant voice. "Heart. Attack," I forced out. "Sir, describe your symptoms." Chest. Crushing, left arm. "Can't breathe. Help is on the way. Stay with me." I lay back on the cold floor, phone pressed to my ear, the operator's voice fading in and out. Questions, my age, medications, location, blurred together. Wesley had disappeared inside. Cora knelt beside me, her hand light and useless on my shoulder. "Dad, you'll be okay. You probably just panicked." I looked at her, my only child, and saw someone I didn't recognize. The physical pain was unbearable, but the betrayal cut deeper. The operator's calm, steady voice anchored me. "Stay still. Keep breathing. Help is coming." From the living room, Wesley's voice drifted out again, careless and amused, laughing at something on TV while I lay dying a few feet away. Cora stayed kneeling beside me, her hand on my shoulder, a small performative punctuation rather than real comfort. 4 minutes away now, sir, the operator said. I closed my eyes as pain rolled through me in ruthless waves. Underneath it came a cold, clear thought. They won't help me. I'm on my own. Then the siren cut off close by. Red and blue light splashed across the garage walls, turning everything frantic and unreal. Paramedics burst in, fast, efficient, all-purpose and practiced motion. They raked through questions like a checklist. Age, medications, what happened. I managed the answers in ragged gasps. One of them glanced toward the brightly lit windows of the house. Family here? We can take one person with us, he asked. I nodded toward the doorway where Wesley and Cora stood watching. He stepped away, came back with a face that had gone carefully neutral, an expression that said everything without saying it. They said they'll come to the hospital tomorrow. Can't ride with us right now. The sentence hit like a stone dropped into still water. They aren't coming. We need to go now, the paramedics said. They strapped me to the stretcher and wheeled me past the Halloween display I'd set up an hour earlier. Pumpkins, lights, fake webs, every cheerful prop reduced to background to my collapse. Through the squeeze of the oxygen mask, I watched Wesley and Cora in the doorway, motionless. The ambulance doors slid shut, cutting them out of view. Banner University Medical Center's emergency room was bright, cold, and urgent. Medical staff surrounded me in a whirl of IV lines, EKG leads, and the steady squeeze of a blood pressure cuff. Dr. Mitchell, woman in her 50s, hands quick, eyes calm, read the monitors with a look that steered between worry and command. Mr. Woods, you've had an acute myocardial infarction, an actual heart attack. We need to take you to the cath lab now to place stents and restore blood flow. Time is critical. Do you understand? I nodded, muffled behind the mask. Will I? I wanted to ask. She didn't answer with promises. Instead, we're going to take good care of you. We have to move. The ceiling tiles blurred as they moved me through fluorescent corridors. Words, blocked arteries, cardiac catheterization, stent placement, washed over me and landed with the same bluntness. This is serious. This could kill me, and yet they had stayed home. The catheterization lab was sterile and hushed except for the beeps of monitors. Dr. Mitchell walked me through the procedure as they worked, inserting stents to open the clogged vessels. I lay there, mostly sedated but awake enough to watch the images on a screen I didn't fully understand. 2 stents went in. As the blood began to flow more easily, the choking pressure in my chest loosened a fraction. You're lucky, Dr. Mitchell said. You called quickly. She added, another 20 minutes. And the rest trailed off because the meaning was clear. Lucky I had called myself. I'd saved myself because the people living in my house couldn't be bothered. The ICU nights were quiet, filled with the low mechanical chorus of machines keeping time with my heart. Wires and monitors tracked every beat. Nurses checked my vitals in a slow, repetitive rhythm. Days slipped by in a haze of medication and routine checks. On the second day, Cora came once, 15 minutes. Dad, oh my gosh, this place is so hard to find and the parking is terrible, she said, breathless, already half in complaint. Her thumb flicked across her phone while she talked. I've been so worried. You came once, I said softly. It's a long drive, and Wesley needed the car for his meetings. You understand? She glanced at the time on her phone, the real priority. I should go soon, she said, folding up her concern like a receipt. Traffic got bad, she said, an excuse folded into a promise. And then Cora left. She swore she'd be back, but she never returned. Wesley didn't show up either, not once. Nurses came and went, strangers with practiced tenderness doing more for me than my own family had. On the third night, a nurse named Rose checked my IV. She was older, her hands steady, her eyes rimmed with fatigue. She glanced at the empty chair beside my bed. Honey, where's your family? You shouldn't be alone after something like this. Most people have someone here all the time. I lay there, quiet, the question folding over me. They're busy, I heard myself say. Rose's face softened in a way that felt like pity more than comfort. After she left, exhaustion settled on me, but sleep refused to come. The question kept returning. Where's your family? And with it a counting that felt more like accusation than arithmetic. They moved in when Wesley's business faltered. Temporary, they'd promised, just until they found their feet. 4 years of until we get back on our feet. The house Margaret and I had bought and paid for over 3 decades had become their free room and board. Market rent in Phoenix for a house like mine, $2,500 a month, times 48 months, $60,000. Utilities, about $350 a month, another $17,000. Groceries, insurance, the roof repair last year, the new water heater, I'd covered it all. The total snapped into focus, $140,000. 4 years of support. 4 years of quiet taking. My fingers drummed against the hospital blanket as if to prove the sums. The numbers didn't lie. Where's your family? The answer formed in the dark, flat, and immutable. They're not. Not anymore. I whispered it into the room. 4 years. $140,000. Pause. And they stayed home. Pause. Where's your family? My hand closed into a loose resolving fist on the blanket. I'm done. I'm done being used. Outside, the hospital kept its night rhythm. Wheels squeaking, distant voices, the occasional alarm. My phone sat face down on the bedside table, the screen dark. Tomorrow, Dr. Mitchell had said, discharge plans would be discussed. Tomorrow I would need someone to pick me up, drive me home. I already knew who wouldn't volunteer. My fingers tapped a slow, steady cadence, not nervous but methodical. The math kept running through my head, 140,000. 4 years. 1 visit. 0 calls. The tapping stopped. My hand tightened. Morning would come. And when it did, things would change. A week after the heart attack, Dr. Mitchell signed the discharge papers. I sat on the bed's edge in the clothes I'd left at the nurse's station the day before. Dropped off like luggage rather than brought by hands that cared. Complete rest for at least 2 weeks, she said, handing me a thick folder. No strenuous activity. Take these medications as prescribed. Avoid stress. Your heart needs to heal. Follow-up is in 2 weeks. Do you have someone at home to help you? I hesitated. Yes, I'll manage. Hospital policy put me in a wheelchair to the automatic doors. No family car was waiting outside. I ordered a taxi, and the driver helped me into the back seat, slid my discharge folder and small bag beside me. More care than my relatives had shown. As Banner University Medical Center receded in my side mirror, I watched the building shrink and thought, I survived this alone. 20 minutes later, the taxi rolled into my neighborhood. Familiar streets, desert plants, tile roofs. My house appeared and a different tightness closed in my chest. Not a medical spasmodic pain, but a cold, precise recognition. The Halloween decorations I'd strung up an hour before everything fell apart sagged in the pale November light, pitiful and abandoned. The driver steadied me at the door, helped with my bag. I paid and tipped well, watched him go. Then I stood on my porch, key in hand, inhaled, and opened the door. The smell hit first. Stale food, unwashed dishes, something sour coming from the kitchen. Inside, the living room was chaos. The pizza boxes crowned the coffee table, beer bottles stood in a sloppy row on the end table, and dirty plates dotted every surface. The television shouted some daytime program while Wesley was draped across my couch and Cora sat in the armchair, both locked to the screen, neither lifting a head when I stepped in. Wesley's voice was flat, eyes never leaving the TV. "Oh, you're back. We thought you'd stay longer." "No. How are you?" "No concern. Just surprised that I'd returned to my own house." "You should have called," Cora added, glancing up only long enough to keep up appearances. "We weren't expecting you today." I stood in the doorway with my hospital bag in hand. I was discharged. "This is my home." Wesley shrugged. "Yeah, sure." I carried my bag down the hall to my bedroom and unpacked slowly, the familiar motions feeling foreign in a place now lived in by strangers wearing faces I once loved. Evening settled. I made a simple meal in the chaotic kitchen, soup and toast, the gentle fare Dr. Mitchell had insisted on. I cleared a sliver of counter space amid their mess. When the smell reached them, Wesley and Cora drifted in and helped themselves without asking, ferrying bowls to the dining table. I joined them, eating with care, my body fragile from the ordeal. Silence stretched between our bites until Cora filled it with a voice too bright, too practiced. Dad, honestly, it was so peaceful without you here. No offense, but you're always hovering. We could finally relax. My spoon froze halfway to my mouth. I was in the hospital, I said quietly. I know, but still, she shot back, defensive. You have to admit you can be a lot sometimes. Wesley nodded, fork in hand. Yeah, man. Chill and give us space. This is our home, too. I set the spoon down, felt its weight, and said calmly, This is your home, too. They heard the literal meaning and missed the rest. They ate and talked about whatever they'd watched while I fought for my life. They were strangers in the skin of my family. Late that night, when the house finally quieted, I locked myself in my study. This little room still felt like sanctuary, the only place they hadn't colonized. I opened the filing cabinet and pulled out folders I hadn't touched in months. The property deed, my name only, purchased 32 years ago with Margaret, paid off 15 years ago, the clear title. The will I'd drafted after she died, a simple document naming Cora as sole beneficiary. I stared at those pages. Bank statements, pension deposits, Social Security records, the savings I'd built over 40 years of careful planning. Hospital reports detailed the acute myocardial infarction, high-risk event, and recorded. That I'd called 911 myself, I stacked the papers with the methodical precision of a former school administrator, turned evidence organizer, opened my laptop, and pulled up Arizona landlord-tenant law, my notepad filled with bullet points, procedures, requirements, rights. By 2 a.m, the plan wasn't fully formed, but the foundation was there. Systematic, legal, irreversible. I stood and stretched, still physically fragile but thinking clearly. At the study window I looked out at the dark street, neighbors' warm lights, normal families, functioning lives, and felt something settle inside me that wasn't fear. It was resolve. I'd spent 35 years as a school principal, sorting problems, enforcing rules, protecting an institution. I understood how systems bent and broke, and how documentation made them rigid and unstoppable. The papers sat behind me on the desk, the deed in my name, the hospital reports that documented abandonment, the will that needed rewriting, the eviction research I'd compiled. I pressed a hand to the cool window pane. A car rolled by outside. Life went on. Mine should too. But first I had to take it back. Tomorrow I'd make the calls. Tonight I was done being the victim. My reflection in the dark glass showed something unfamiliar. Not hot anger, which burns and fades, but a colder, more patient resolve. I opened my laptop and typed, Estate Planning Attorney, Phoenix, Arizona. Names and profiles glowed up. I read reviews, took notes. Morning was hours away, but I was already building the plan. 4 days later, I sat in my car outside a professional building in central Phoenix. The 30-minute drive was my first since the heart attack. Dr. Mitchell had cleared me for light activity and my hands were steady on the wheel. I'd chosen Margaret Chen from the hospital's resource list and verified her credentials. Estate planning specialist, 23 years experience. Client reviews describing situations like mine. Fee, $350 an hour, 90-minute consultation. I'd called the day before and got an appointment for today. The folder of documents I'd organized that first night sat on the passenger seat. 15 minutes early. Good, time to compose. This was not about emotion. It was about strategy. Margaret's office was on the 4th floor. Tasteful, law books on one wall, framed diplomas on another. She was in her mid-50s, sharp-eyed in a charcoal suit. Her handshake was firm. Mr. Woods, thank you for coming. Tell me what brings you here. I opened the folder and spoke in the steady, factual tone I'd used for decades in faculty meetings and superintendent reviews. No drama, just facts. I need my daughter and son-in-law removed from my property. They've lived there 4 years without rent. 2 weeks ago, my son-in-law's stunt triggered a heart attack. They didn't visit properly. I want them out, and I want to change my will. Margaret listened, took notes, and I pushed the documents across. Deed first, then medical reports, then bank statements showing the support I'd provided. She examined the deed and said, Legally, there are tenants in your home even without a written lease. Arizona law is specific. She turned her monitor so I could see the statutes. You'll need to follow proper eviction procedure. 30-day notice to quit, then file an unlawful detainer if they don't leave. Perfect documentation is crucial. No shortcuts. Everything by the book. Can you commit to that? I told her I'd been a principal for 35 years. I know procedures, I said. I'll follow every rule. She printed the relevant statutes, added them to my folder, and explained the timeline. 30-day notice, then court filing. Hearing in about 3 weeks. If the judgment goes in my favor, the court issues a writ of restitution, and the constable enforces removal. Total, she estimated 60 to 90 days from the first notice. Longer than I wanted, but airtight. Then she shifted to the will. In Arizona, you can choose your beneficiaries. You're not required to leave anything to adult children. She watched my face. Are you sure? This change could permanently damage your relationship. I said steady. When I had a heart attack, she told me it was peaceful and that I hovered too much. Our relationship is already damaged. She nodded. Then we'll make it legally bulletproof. You can leave most to charities and a nominal amount, $1, to your daughter to make contesting harder. She outlined the steps: draft, review, notarization, 2 witnesses, about 2 weeks to complete. She also recommended a living will and healthcare power of attorney given my recent event. Total fees, $2,500 for eviction notice preparation plus full will revision. I didn't hesitate. I pulled my checkbook from my jacket, brought specifically for this, and wrote the check. My savings, built over 40 years, could cover it. Margaret accepted the check and handed me a receipt. The notice will be ready Friday, she said. You must personally serve it, hand it to each of them, document the date and time, take a photo if possible. Then wait exactly 30 days before further action. I repeated it back. 30 days. Document everything. She stood and offered her hand. Mr. Woods, you're doing the right thing. Sometimes family earns their place, sometimes they don't. I shook her hand, nodded once, and left. In the parking garage, I sat in the car with the folder on my lap, the air warm around me. The engine stayed off. The plan was started. The next moves were mine. Through the windshield downtown, Phoenix rose in crisp geometry. Streets and buildings and systems that ran on permits, codes, and rules. I'd spent my life inside systems. Margaret Chen would draft the papers, I'd serve the notice, and the system would do the rest. This wasn't revenge. Revenge is messy and emotional. This was procedural, documented, unstoppable. I started the engine and eased out of the parking garage, heading back to Ahwatukee, to the house that was legally mine and would soon be actually mine. 3 days until the eviction notice. 2 weeks until the new will. A timeline existed now. A plan was moving. For the first time since that Halloween, something in my chest loosened. Not the medical pain, but the weight of helplessness. I wasn't helpless anymore. Home rose into view. Familiar streets, the sagging Halloween decorations still clinging to the porch like apologies. Wesley's car sat in the drive. Wesley, unemployed, living on my savings. I killed the engine, folder in my hands, and sat a moment watching the front door as if I could will the future to arrive sooner. In 3 days, I would walk through that door with a legal document. For now, I would go to my study, lock the door, and wait. The folder felt solid and real. The next days were careful and small. Medicines at exact times, short walks, cardiac rehab exercises. I kept the study door closed, avoided them except when food or silence forced us into the same room. They took my withdrawal for weakness. They mistook planning for surrender. Friday, my phone chimed. Message from Margaret Chen. Documents ready. I drove to her office, signed the acknowledgments, and took 2 sealed envelopes from her. She walked me through service one last time. Hand each person their notice personally, document date and time. Photograph, if possible. That started the 30-day clock. I tucked the envelopes into my folder and drove home. Saturday came. I woke at 6, showered, and dressed precisely. Slacks, button-down, the uniform of someone presenting at a school board meeting. Formality matters. Presentation matters. I made coffee, ate alone, and kept to the kitchen until movement upstairs told me they were stirring. By 9, the house had life in it again. Wesley patted down first in sweatpants and a worn t-shirt. "Morning," he mumbled without looking up. My voice was calm, edged with the authority I'd used for decades. "Wesley, Cora, I need both of you in the dining room now." The tone made him pause. "What's this about?" he asked. "Just come. Bring Cora." 5 minutes later they stood across from me, Wesley suspicious, Cora anxious. I remained seated. I picked up the first envelope and slid it across the table. "This is for you, Wesley." I handed the second to Cora. Their hands trembled as they accepted them. "What is this?" Wesley demanded. "Open them." He tore his envelope and scanned the header. The words were simple and official. 30-day notice to quit premises. Confusion flickered across his face, then understanding. Then a heat that turned to rage. "You can't do this! You can't kick us out, this is ridiculous!" he shouted. The sound ricocheted off the walls, angry and raw. Cora read hers slower. Tears tracked down her cheeks before her voice found her. Dad, I'm your daughter. How can you do this to me, to us?" Her plea trembled with genuine hurt and cultivated entitlement. My hands stayed flat on the table. My voice was even, controlled. The voice that ran assemblies, chaired meetings, wrote policies. "This is my house," I said. "I've supported you for 4 years." I let the words sit between us. "You showed me I'm a burden." The statement landed like the final piece of a ledger balanced. Cold, undeniable, and irreversible. "When I was in the hospital," I said slowly, "you couldn't be bothered to visit properly. You told me my absence was peaceful." Wesley slammed the notice down so hard the edges rattled. "We'll fight this. You can't just throw us on the street." I pointed at the paper. "Read it carefully. It's perfectly legal, prepared by an attorney. You have 30 days from today. That's December 16th. I suggest you start looking for housing." The rest of Saturday dissolved into pleading and panic. Cora sobbed and begged, trying every emotional angle. "We have nowhere to go. Winter's coming, we can't afford rent." She cried. "You've had 4 years of free housing. You should have savings," I said flatly. Wesley paced the living room, phone glued to his ear, calling anyone who might help. By afternoon, he'd spoken to a free online service for 20 minutes and hung up looking deflated. "What did they say?" Cora demanded. Wesley's jaw was tight. "They said the notice looks legitimate. Since there's no lease and no rent, he can do this." The reality fell on them like cold rain. Sunday brought guilt as a weapon. "Mom would be ashamed of you," Cora said, voice trembling with righteous outrage. "Kicking out your own daughter." I met her eyes and spoke quietly. "Your mother would be ashamed of how you treated me, how you let your husband mock me and abandon me in the hospital. Don't pretend you know what she'd say." She recoiled as if I'd struck her. The house became a Cold War zone. Conversations stopped. We traded clipped sentences and deliberate silences. Meals were eaten separately. The TV stayed on late. Volume turned up like a taunt. Small, petty acts of defiance became the daily weather. I documented everything. Noise levels, times, rude behaviors, my notebook filled with methodical entries. Monday, Wesley blocked my car in the driveway for 3 hours. Tuesday, Cora tossed out mail that had been on the counter. Small provocations, testing boundaries. I responded practically. I put a lock on my bedroom door to match the one on my study and moved important documents to the trunk of my car. Now, 5 days after serving the notice, I sat in my study and checked the calendar. 25 days until the deadline. If they refused to leave, Margaret would file the unlawful detainer and the wheels of the court would start turning. I'd learned patience and education. I could wait. A knock at the study door made me look up. "Dad, can we talk?" Cora's voice was small and tentative. I stared at the closed wood. "Read the notice. 30 days. That's all the talking needed." Her footsteps retreated. I marked another day on the calendar. 9 days after service, the calls began. Cousin Janet from Tucson rang, voice tight. "Eldon, Ka says you're evicting her, your own daughter." I kept my voice flat. "That's correct." She tried to soften the edge. "That seems harsh." "Perhaps," I said, "but it's my legal right." The calls multiplied. Nephews, cousins, familiar voices all hearing a curated version of her story. I answered briefly and factually, refusing to be dragged into a popularity contest. By evening, my phone showed 6 missed calls and 4 voicemails that I didn't listen to. They didn't matter. This was property law, not a family reunion. 3 days later, I returned from cardiac rehab to find my study door standing open and the lock mechanism hanging loose, screws stripped from the frame. My heart rate climbed not from pain but from a cold, controlled fury. Filing cabinet and desk were untouched, but the symbolic barrier had been violated. Wesley lounged in the living room, feet on the coffee table, watching TV. "Wesley," I said, "my study door lock is broken." He didn't look up. Must have been weak or something. Old hardware gives out." The casual lie stung. I photographed the stripped screws and the damaged frame, then drove to the police substation. Officer Rodriguez, mid-40s, composed, took my report professionally. "Property damage?" he asked. "Yes, I want it documented. I've served them with an eviction notice. This is retaliation." Rodriguez wrote it all down, assigned a case number, and advised me to keep documenting. Photos, timestamps, descriptions. "If it continues, you'll have evidence for the eviction hearing," he said. I left with a police report number, stopped at a hardware store for a replacement deadbolt and a small wireless camera that recorded to cloud storage. The locksmith fee would be about $150, but what mattered more was the record. By evening, the new deadbolt was installed, and the discrete camera mounted on a bookshelf aimed at the study door. I tested it from my phone. Clear image, motion-activated recording. Ready. On Monday, December 1st, 15 days before the deadline, I woke at 1:47 a.m. to noise downstairs. Male voices, laughter, music, the clink of glass. I dressed quietly and crept to the top of the stairs. The living room lights were blazing. Wesley sat in the armchair, beer in hand, flanked by 3 large, rough-looking men I didn't recognize. More beer bottles clustered on the coffee table. The television blared an action movie at full volume. The house had been invaded under the cover of my family's arrogance. One of the strangers spotted me on the stairs. "Hey, that the old man?" Wesley glanced up, lifted his beer in a mock salute. "Yeah, that's him. Don't worry, he's harmless." I moved down the stairs slowly. "Wesley, it's almost 2 in the morning. Who are these people?" "Friends," he said, casual. "We're just hanging out. Relax." In my own house at 2 a.m. on a Monday. One of the men, tattooed arms, hard eyes, leaned forward. "You got a problem?" he asked. I measured the situation. 3 large men, potentially volatile, late hour. I pulled out my phone and hit record. "I'm documenting this. You're trespassing. All of you need to leave now." Wesley stood, his face tightening. "Put that phone away. These are my guests. This is my house." I kept recording, my voice steady. "This is my property. You're not on a lease because there is no lease. You're trespassing. 10 seconds to get them out or I call the police. 9, 8, 7. My thumb hovered over the emergency dial. The tattooed man rose and edged toward me. "Maybe you should go back to bed, old man." I did not back down. 6, 5. Something in my stillness made him hesitate. Wesley put a hand on the man's shoulder. "Forget it. Not worth it." To his friends, "Come on, truck's outside. We'll finish there." Grumbling, they gathered bottles and left. Wesley shot me a look that tasted of promise and threat. "This isn't over." 14 days, I said quietly. "Then you're gone whether you like it or not." When the front door slammed, I stopped recording, saved the file, checked the timestamp, and backed it up to the cloud. Then I sat at the dining table and opened my laptop. Lease violation notice, guest policy breach. I typed the incident report, date, time, physical descriptions, Wesley's admission that they were his friends, trespass on the property, printed 2 copies, one for my file, one to serve Wesley in the morning. By 3 a.m., the new lock was secure on my bedroom door, phone charged on the nightstand. I slept with a steady sense of purpose. They'd tried to intimidate me. They hadn't understood who they were facing. 35 years as a principal taught me to outlast drama and win on procedure. December 16th arrived. The deadline. I woke early and checked the house. Their bedroom doors were closed. Their boxes and clothes remained. Cars sat in the driveway. They had not packed. Seeing them still there felt like a small, cold victory. I drove downtown to Margaret Chen's office with a folder thicker now. The original notice, the police report about the broken lock, security footage burned to disk, the written lease violation note, photos, and my detailed logbook. Margaret reviewed everything, methodical and unruffled. Since they hadn't vacated, we filed the forcible detainer, Arizona's formal eviction action. I signed the complaint and wrote a check for the $218 filing fee. Margaret submitted the case electronically to Maricopa County Justice Court before noon. The hearing would come after the holidays, probably early January. The legal machinery was engaged. Now, more waiting. In the weeks that followed, the provocations escalated. Wesley blocked me in hallways, left messes in shared areas, turned music up during the hours I worked in my study, each act petty and deliberate. I documented everything, refused to be baited, and kept my silence like armor. A few days before Christmas, Cora tried one last emotional appeal, cornering me in the kitchen. "It's Christmas, Dad. Can't we call a truce? Please. Don't ruin the holidays." Her voice trembled with urgency and a practiced softness. I set my coffee down slowly. "You ruined this family when you left me alone after a heart attack," I said. "When you told me my absence was peaceful. Holidays don't erase facts." She flinched as if I'd struck her. "Christmas Eve." I locked my door and stayed in my room while they threw a party in the living room. Loud music, laughter, the cavalier parade of friends they'd invited. I ordered Chinese, ate alone, watched a movie with headphones, and let them have their defiance. The court date was set, January 7th, 3 weeks after the filing. I dressed for it in the suit I'd worn to school board meetings for decades. Sober, professional, ready to let the law do what I had begun. Dark navy suit, crisp white shirt, conservative tie. Presentation mattered. Margaret met me outside the Maricopa County Justice Court, a blunt concrete building where small claims and eviction cases get settled. We sat in the hallway and mapped strategy. "Let me do most of the talking," she advised. "Answer the judge's questions directly, briefly, factually. No emotion." I nodded. Courtroom decorum was familiar terrain. Budget hearings, personnel disputes, board investigations. Wesley and Cora arrived 10 minutes before the hearing, unprepared and unrepresented. He wore jeans and a rumpled shirt. She dressed casually, eyes fixed on the floor. The bailiff called Woods v. Wesley and Cora Woods, and we filed into the small courtroom. The judge, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and no-nonsense bearing, presided from the bench. This was a forcible detainer action. Margaret opened our case methodically. Deed proving sole ownership, proof of service for the 30-day notice dated November 16th, testimony that I'd handed each notice in person, evidence the December 16th deadline passed with no vacating, the police report about the broken lock, security footage from the study, photos of damage, and my written log of lease violations. The judge examined each exhibit, asking pointed questions. "Mr. Woods, did the defendants have a written lease?" "No, Your Honor." "Did they pay rent?" "No, Your Honor." "How long have they lived on your property?" 4 years, Your Honor." "And you personally served notice on November 16th, giving them until December 16th to vacate?" "Correct, Your Honor." The judge turned to Wesley and Cora. "Do you dispute these facts? That you received notice? That you did not vacate? That you have no lease?" Wesley tried to speak, voice rising. He can't just... But the judge cut him off. "Answer the question." He deflated into silence. Without factual dispute, they had no legal defense. She reviewed the police report on the damaged lock. "Property damage during the notice period," she said, looking at Wesley. "Sir, This does not help your position. Then the ruling. Mr. Woods has been more than generous. 4 years of free housing. You responded to lawful notice with property damage and defiance. I am granting the plaintiff's petition. A 10-day writ of restitution is issued. Defendants must vacate within 10 days from today, January 17th. If they fail to vacate, the Maricopa County Constable will enforce removal and place belongings at the curb. Court costs awarded to the plaintiff. The gavel came down, final and official. Margaret leaned close, whispering, "Perfect outcome." 10 days, I collected my folder. Across the room, Cora wept quietly while Wesley sat rigid, fists clenched. The legal system had spoken. Procedure had done its work. We stepped into the winter sunlight pooling through the courthouse windows. "There's one more thing," I said. "The will revision." Margaret checked her calendar. "The draft is ready. We can schedule signing and notarization this week. Thursday work for you?" "Thursday is perfect." We shook hands at the corner where our paths diverged. "Congratulations, Mr. Woods. The hard part is done." I didn't smile, only felt the cold confirmation settling into calm. Folder under my arm, I walked to the car in the January light. 10 days until they were legally required to be gone, and a will to finalize before they learned what else they'd lost. 2 days after the hearing, on Thursday, January 9th, I sat again in Margaret Chen's office for the will signing. The document lay on thick legal paper, every clause precise, every phrase chosen to be airtight. Margaret walked me through the will line by line. Primary beneficiaries, American Heart Association, $200,000. Local school foundation, the district where I'd spent my career, $180,000. The remainder folded into a charitable trust for educational scholarships. Cora, exactly $1, a token to show she wasn't forgotten. Margaret had arranged 2 impartial witnesses, her paralegal and the office manager, neither connected to me or my family. The notary waited. "This is bulletproof," Margaret said. "Arizona law doesn't force you to leave anything to adult children. The nominal dollar makes it harder to contest." I signed, the pen gliding across the heavy paper. Witnessed, notarized, sealed. Complete. Sunday afternoon, January 12th, 5 days before the eviction deadline. The house hovered in tense limbo. Wesley and Cora moved slowly, packing as if delay might undo the law. I stayed in the study. The security camera kept watch with the door open. Around 3 p.m., Wesley's voice carried down the hall on a one-sided phone call, casual and confident. My hand hovered over the keyboard, then I hit record on my phone and held it near the doorway. "I'm telling you," he said, "after the old man kicks the bucket, we'll get at least $400K. House alone is worth $420. Just gotta wait him out." Pause. "Nah, he's being stubborn, but we'll get it. Blood is blood, right? She's his only kid." Laughter. "Play the long game." Footsteps receding. I replayed the file, each syllable crystal clear. They were beyond freeloading now. They were openly banking on my death. The recording went to 3 secure locations: phone, computer, cloud. Evidence, not for court this time, but for confirmation. Wednesday evening, January 15th, 2 days before the deadline, I cooked dinner. Simple pasta, a salad, enough for 3. I set the table formally and waited. When they returned from packing, I called them to dine. Suspicion softened into hunger. They sat. For several measured minutes we ate in silence until I laid my fork down and spoke. "I have something to tell you before you leave," I said. Cora looked up, a faint hope on her face. "I've changed my will." The words landed hard and plain. "Everything goes to charity now. The American Heart Association, the school foundation, the scholarship trust. Cora, you receive exactly $1 so you're not forgotten. The rest, roughly $400,000, goes to organizations that actually serve a purpose." Their faces shifted. Shock, then comprehension, then a hot, rising fury. Wesley's fork clattered. "You senile old fool. You can't do that," he shouted. I stayed seated, calm. "It's done. Signed, notarized, filed with my attorney. Legally irrevocable. Cora turned white. "Dad, you can't. I'm your daughter." "You're my only child," she whispered. "When I had a heart attack," I answered evenly, "you visited for 15 minutes and said my absence was peaceful. You let your husband mock me and use my home." Wesley jumped up, chair scraping. "This is petty, because we won't move fast enough. You're being cruel. I met him without anger. No, it's because I overheard your phone call. After the old man kicks the bucket, we'll get at least $400K. Play the long game. You weren't living here out of need. You were waiting for me to die to inherit." Color drained from his face. He'd been exposed. Cora blinked between us, confused. "What phone call?" she asked. "You were recorded," Wesley blurted. "That's invasion of privacy. In my own home," I replied, "I can record what I hear. Arizona is a one-party consent state. The recording is both legal and damning." I rose, gathered my plate, and walked to the sink. Behind me, Wesley erupted. Threats, curses, frantic pleas to undo what was done, while Cora's sobs turned sharp and bitter. I rinsed my dish and left it in the drainer. Upstairs, I locked my bedroom door and sat on the bed's edge in the hush. Everything had been finished. The eviction, the will, the evidence. They knew the truth now and the depth of their loss. 2 more days, then silence. My house, my life, my choices returned to me. I woke at 6 on Friday, January 17th, deadline day, dressed, made coffee, and sat in my study watching the security feeds. The house was a hurricane of boxes and half-dismantled furniture. Wesley and Cora moved like people desperate for time. At 9 on the dot, a patrol car eased into the driveway. I watched through the window as a stocky uniformed constable approached, papers in hand, and knocked firmly at my front door. I opened it. "Mr. Woods, I'm Constable Martinez. I'm here to enforce the writ of restitution issued by Justice Court." I nodded. He stepped in with that official steady presence and called out in a voice that left no room for argument. "This is the Maricopa County Constable. You are required to vacate these premises immediately. You may take your personal belongings. You have until 2 p.m. to remove everything. After that, any remaining items will be placed at the curb." The next 5 hours were controlled chaos. Wesley swore and heaved clothes into garbage bags. Cora wrapped dishes in newspaper and cried between frantic motions. They'd rented a U-Haul, pathetically small for 4 years of accumulation, idling on the curb. Martinez stayed in the living room, keeping order, twice warning Wesley to calm his language or face citation for disorderly conduct. I watched mostly from my study, the door open, the camera recording it all. They took what they claimed as theirs. A bedroom set, a beat-up entertainment center, the rest left behind. At 1:50, the U-Haul pulled away, Cora following in their sedan. The constable walked the house with me, signed the completion form, and said, "Property is returned to your possession, Mr. Woods." He shook my hand and left. Later, I learned the consequences. No apartment would take them, no references, no deposits saved after 4 years of free living. They landed in a rundown motel off the interstate with a flickering neon sign, $650 a week, no kitchen, pay as you go, and questionable neighbors in the lot. Cora's part-time spa income, when $600 a month, couldn't keep up. Wesley's crypto business produced nothing. Within a week, whatever meager savings they scraped together evaporated. The precarious life they'd deferred for years collapsed like borrowed. Scaffolding, 8 days after. The eviction. My phone buzzed with a photo from an unknown number. A picture of Wesley, sitting at a desk in what looked like a police station. An hour later, another message. "Thought you'd want to know." A quick search turned up a Phoenix business section blurb. Wesley charged in a cryptocurrency pump and dump scheme. 7 victims, combined losses of about $43,000. Wire and securities fraud. Bail, $15,000. His business wasn't an investment. It was a scam. I felt no glee, only a cold, factual acknowledgement. He couldn't make bail. $15,000 was out of reach. He sat in county jail for 6 days while Cora called every relative begging for help. A distant cousin finally posted bond. He was released pending trial, returned to the motel, but something had broken between them. 3 weeks on, mid-February by my calendar, an anonymous photo of court filings landed in my inbox. A divorce petition. Cora had filed, citing irreconcilable differences. The parasitic partnership was imploding. I saved the image with the rest of my file, not because I needed it for anything, but because completion mattered. Wesley's criminal choices had consequences of their own. My eviction had only removed the protective bubble of free housing and exposed the reality they'd avoided. Early February brought a quieter life I hadn't known in 4 years. Genuine solitude, not loneliness. I woke when my body wanted, ate what I liked, and stopped scheduling meals around other people's appetites. The house breathed differently, lighter. Cardiac rehab continued 3 times a week. My numbers improved. "Your progress is excellent," Dr. Mitchell told me. "Whatever stress you were under is clearly gone." I nodded. Some things needed no words. I started small projects, repainting the hallway, organizing the garage, planting a front yard flower bed. On Valentine's Day, I was at the kitchen table reviewing finances when my phone buzzed. "Cora, Dad, I'm sorry. We were wrong. Can we talk?" 8 words. 4 months of absence and conflict reduced to a single text. I set the phone down and waited 3 days, worked outside, did rehab, lived quietly, before answering. When I finally typed, I wrote plainly, "Cora, I love you, but respect comes before forgiveness. When you're ready to treat me like a father, not a resource, we can talk. Not before." I read it 3 times and sent it. Typing dots glowed, then faded. No reply. Hours became days. No disappointment, only recognition. She wasn't ready. Maybe she never would be. Real change is more than words when the hardships come. Mid-March, the paper carried another brief update. Wesley pleaded guilty to reduced fraud charges, 18 months probation, community service, and restitution of $43,000 to identified victims. No more jail beyond the 6 days he'd served. I read it twice and felt a clean kind of closure. A few days later, a follow-up. Divorce finalized. Cora, now single, moved to a tiny studio, working 2 jobs, full-time at a dental office and part-time at the spa, learning what financial independence really meant. The lessons I couldn't teach while she was insulated from consequence finally arrived. Late March brought Arizona spring. Warm mornings and desert blooms. I sat on my back patio with coffee at sunrise, watched the sky shift, and waved to Mrs. Patterson next door as she watered her plants. "Morning, Eldon. Beautiful day," she said. It was. Margaret texted, "All estate documents finalized and filed." "You're all set, Mr. Woods," I replied. "Thank you for everything." She wrote back, "You handled everything with impressive discipline. Enjoy your peace." I looked at the flower bed I'd planted, verbena, lantana, salvia, tough plants thriving in harsh conditions. I'd chosen them intentionally, resilience, survival, bloom after difficulty. My heart beat steady under my ribs, the heart that almost stopped on Halloween night now healing. I thought over the last 6 months. The attack, the isolation, the legal fight, the eviction, Wesley's arrest, Cora's silence. All of it had led here, to this patio, this peace. Some might call it revenge. I call it justice, for boundaries, for dignity, for a life reclaimed. I had stopped enabling and started enforcing the systems that protect property and honor actual wishes. Now I lived in the results. Quiet, peaceful, free. For the first time in 4 years, since my wife died 5 years ago, I felt whole again. Not because anyone had been hurt, but because I'd stopped letting anyone hurt me. The coffee was good. The sunrise was beautiful. The flowers would bloom. Life, quietly, had gotten better. If you liked this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. Thank you for watching.